Tonight, John Howard sells the benefits of his baby bonus. Taliban supporters rally against the bombing in Afghanistan. And an arsonist behind the season's first threatening bushfire.
With Anne Fulwood, this is 7 News.
Good evening. Our coverage of the federal election campaign is coming up, but first there have been angry scenes in Pakistan tonight where hundreds have protested against the continuing US airstrikes in Afghanistan. Operation Enduring Freedom has now entered its 4th week amid reports of some of the heaviest fighting in the campaign.
Waving anti-US placards and holding copies of the Quran, the group condemned the military action as they marched through Peshawar. This demonstration remained peaceful, but it followed a violent attack on Christians in an apparent payback for the war against terror. 18 members of a Protestant congregation in the Punjab province were massacred. 5 others were critically injured. As the attackers opened fire, they shouted that Pakistan would become a graveyard of Christians to avenge deaths in Afghanistan.
We already were fearful, and now we are really fearful.
President Musharraf has condemned the attack and vowed to capture the terrorists. Across the border, US airstrikes are getting heavier. Military strikes have continued in the southern Taliban stronghold of Kandahar after a lull of 2 days. Further north, there's new reports of Afghan civilians killed by errant bombs. Witnesses say 2 adults died and a child was injured in the village of Ghani Khail inside Northern Alliance territory. Meanwhile, Japan has announced it's ready to make a military commitment to the war on terrorism.
The task that is helping to do something for the extermination of terrorism is something most people are for.
The new legislation will allow troops to take up a non-combat role in the US-led campaign. Louise Negline, 7 News.
And the United States remains adamant that it will not back away from the war against terror. Its commitment was again supported today by the families and friends of those who died in the terrorist attack on New York. They gathered for a memorial service.
Oh, say, can you see?
They gathered in the shadows of the ruins to remember those who died there. For many families, it was their first visit to Ground Zero, where more than 4,000 are still believed to be buried.
And hallowed is the ground on which we stand.
They clutched photos, wives, husbands, fathers, mothers, sons, daughters. Tears filled their eyes, hearts broken.
They were innocent, and they were brutally, viciously, unjustly taken from us.
For only the second time, work stopped at the site, still a smoking mess 48 days on.
Since September the 11th, we, the United States of America, have become the reunited States of America.
Later, families were given urns of soil from the site. For many, it will be the only remains they have to bury. In the United States, Mike Amor, 7 News.
Firefighters are warning of a dangerous summer ahead, with the first major bushfire burning out 80 hectares of bushland just west of Sydney today. Crews in New South Wales are on high alert, and they say many people living near the bush should be prepared.
By mid-afternoon, more than 60 firefighters swarmed to the lower Blue Mountains. The blaze started in rough terrain at a local bushland reserve. Flames quickly jumped the railway line, threatening nearby homes.
It's just a real panic.
A lot of smoke. Yeah, we could see flames.
The main concern, protecting at least 10 houses in the line of fire. Residents also doing their best to keep the flames away.
It has progressed fairly quickly because of these northwesterly winds, and it's blowing it into the Emu Plains area.
Water bomber helicopters dumped thousands of litres on the blaze as it raged towards homes. This house lucky to escape relatively unscathed as a nearby tree went up in flames. After several hours of intense attack, firefighters managed to steer the flames away from properties. One firefighter was taken to hospital suffering smoke inhalation. As the fire burned through the night, the investigation began. Firefighters say the blaze was started by someone, but can't yet say if it was deliberate. Another bushfire is also out of control south of Kempsey on the state's mid-north coast. Locals tried to get a closer look as plumes of black smoke covered the area. At least one house was destroyed and a petrol station was also under threat.
Yeah, smoke's everywhere. Before it was sort of, you could see around, but smoke's just enveloped is the word.
There's a total fire ban enforced across much of New South Wales tomorrow, and firefighters say anyone living near the bush should clean out their gardens and gutters now before it's too late. Stephanie Kennedy, 7 News.
Guns, drugs and money have been seized in a series of raids across Adelaide. 140 officers were involved in Operation Calypso. They searched 30 homes and 2 hydroponics stores, finding illegal drugs or weapons in all but 4 of the properties. Among the haul, cannabis, cocaine, ecstasy, amphetamines and steroids, while customs officers were called following the discovery of stuffed animals. 15 people were either arrested or reported, and they are believed to be members of a bikie gang. A 28-year-old man has been convicted of manslaughter in Sydney after leaving a toddler to die in the back of a stolen car. Leslie William Cooper had denied any involvement in the death of 2-year-old Leo Nguyen in Cabramatta last December.
She feels that he's a man who robbed her and robbed Leo's life.
Leo's mother had left him in her BMW with the motor running while she dashed into a shop. Cooper stole the car, and when it was found several hours later, Leo was dead from heat exhaustion. Cooper was remanded for sentencing in December. A Sydney bank officer who stole more than $7 million to live in luxury will now spend the next 5 years in a jail cell. Heather Power approved false loans so she could buy jewellery, antiques and a harbourside apartment.
These are just some of the trinkets bank clerk Heather Power bought with $7.6 million of the National Australia Bank's money. Mrs. Power worked at the Seven Hills and Bankstown branches, where over 4 years she made fictitious loan applications to buy herself a secret wealthy lifestyle, unknown to her husband.
She was entrusted to do all the lending for that branch. As they said in court, she was trusted implicitly.
Her Kirribilli hideaway contained numerous artworks and cupboards full of $1,200 bottles of champagne. Judge Megan Latham sentenced Heather Power to a maximum 8 years jail. Despite Mrs. Power's abject remorse, Judge Latham said she engaged in a sustained and calculated course of dishonesty by an employee in a position of trust. Of the near $8 million Mrs. Power embezzled, the NAB has only been able to recover $1.8 million. Now the bank is targeting the prime beneficiaries of her crime in the civil courts. Heather Power spent around $5 million at antique and jewellery dealers Martin & Stein's. Mrs. Power would buy whatever she was shown. One of the salesmen, Chris Smith, told the court, "I'm good at selling. That's why I get paid." Heather Power will be eligible for release in October 2006. Damien Smith, 7 News.
Australia's major banks are under attack, with complaints jumping almost 15%. A clear sign consumers have had enough.
No bank escaped unscathed from the Ombudsman's latest report. It found an average of 200 queries against our major finance institutions were filed every day, adding up to almost 62,000 calls in 12 months.
The banks are not infallible, but problems are dealt with usually promptly.
The biggest grievance, mistakes with transactions and calculations. There were also claimed breaches of contract and settlement delays, while credit cards and other financial products were also causes for concern.
People saying that, no, we didn't enjoy a meal at that restaurant on that particular night, or we didn't buy that book from a particular book supplier.
People do give their credit card numbers over the phone. there is room for those numbers to get out, I guess.
The Australian Bankers Association says the finance institutions now act more quickly to address concerns. An average complaint used to take almost 3 months to process. Now it takes less than 2. And a word of advice from the Australian Bankers Association. It says anyone still paying fees and charges on their accounts should be shopping around, because 75% of all Australians have found a way to completely avoid these costs.
The margins on bank products are actually shrinking as well. So, if you like, customers are winning out both ways.
Emma Power, 7 News.
Stay with us here on the Late News. Next, our coverage of the election campaign, and then the Versace empire takes on an Australian PI, as GPs take on Australia's dependence on alcohol.
The ground force are heading back to some of their biggest surprises.
Do they love the garden enough to look after it after we've left, or do they let it go to rack and ruin?
It just died.
A 1-hour ground force special, Wednesday, 7:30 on 7.
Bruce Bilson, Greg Hunt and Phil Versace have been getting on with the job in our local communities. That's meant $445 million for the Scoresby Freeway, over $500,000 to protect our local environment in Flinders, and a 148% increase in new apprentices in training in Deakin. Yes, there's more to be done, and given your support, John Howard's Liberal team of Bruce Bilson, Greg Hunt and Phil Versace will continue to put our local interests first.
Authorised by Old Crosby for the Liberal Party, Canberra.
Here's your last chance to get into Australia's #1 four-wheel drive and drive away without paying government charges, and drive away without delivery charges, and drive away with the best ever CRV deal. From $31,990, drive away. Hurry in now to the CRV run-out sale.
Do you know what Joan Sutherland, Cathy Freeman and Peter Cosgrove have in common? They've all been Australian of the Year, and now the National Australia Day Council is calling for nominations for the 2002 Australian of the Year Awards.
If you think someone has made a significant contribution to our great nation, then now is the time to nominate them.
Call 1300 655 193 for more details, or you can visit the website at nadc.com.au.
His touch is a miracle.
When he's around sick people, they get well.
But how much is a miracle worth?
It's not about money.
It's about faith. Is it faith?
He's deceiving people.
Or fraud?
Did I just see what I thought I saw?
Blue Healers, Wednesday.
Now to news in business, and the 7 Network has completed a $100 million capital raising. As finance editor David Kosh reports, most of the money will be used to pay off debt.
Institutional investors here and overseas have snapped up the 14 million shares on offer for $7 each. The 7 Network says the money will be used primarily to fix up its balance sheet. Last September, 7 unveiled an 81% drop in profit, largely due to write-offs from its internet and other investments. The core television business continues to turn in a solid performance, but like all media groups, 7 is expecting a fall in advertising revenues after the impact of the American terrorist attack. Investors have hammered News Corp after the media giant lost its 18-month battle to buy American satellite broadcaster DirecTV. The $44 billion deal would have allowed News Corp to combine the business with its Sky Global to build a global satellite television network. But Chairman Rupert Murdoch says he's been forced to drop his offer because DirecTV's owner, General Motors, was taking too long to decide between News Corp and a bid from rival EchoStar. GM has now reportedly approved a sale to EchoStar, and News Corp shares have slumped 90 cents. Briefly, in other business news, massive trading activity after the September 11 attacks has helped the Australian Stock Exchange produce profit of more than $13 million for the last quarter. Qantas has selected Boeing instead of Airbus to supply a new fleet of 15 aircraft, and Coles Myers' long-term credit rating has been downgraded to BBB- by Standard & Poor's. Let's check the markets, and the Australian stock market finished lower, with the ASX 200 and All Ordinary slipping 20 points. AMP and the Commonwealth Bank were among a handful of blue chips to go up. The Australian dollar is buying just 50 US cents, 61 yen and 34 pence. And overseas, Asian markets have taken a thumping. For more business and finance news, visit i7news.com.au. Have a good night.
Thank you, David. The Prime Minister is shifting ground on Australia's role in the war against terrorism. Tonight he rejected any suggestion that our commitment to the conflict is open-ended.
Just last week, John Howard reinforced Australia's willingness to support the United States in the war against terrorism, giving a strong indication more Australian troops could be made available.
Good luck. Requests for further contributions may be made, and they would then be carefully considered.
But now, after calls from senior US politician John McCain for a massive ground troop assault on Afghanistan, the Prime Minister's sending a different message.
Who said our commitment was open-ended?
Mr Howard says it's unlikely large numbers of ground troops will be required.
The goal is to catch and bring to justice, or otherwise deal with Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda terrorist network. The goal is not to subjugate the people of Afghanistan.
Earlier, Mr Howard was outselling the centrepiece of his re-election pitch, a tax rebate for first-time parents who quit their job to raise a child.
Bring back memories?
But Kim Beazley says the rebate won't go far enough. He says mothers will have to earn $52,000 a year to get the full rebate of $2,500, and most will average around $500. The opposition says Labor's GST rollback is much more generous.
Ours is targeted for every Australian. His is targeted, as he always does, in the trickiest possible way.
Experts in family policy say the baby bonus is backward-looking.
Every other country in the world is looking at policies which support work and family, not policies which keep women and mothers out of the workforce.
Experts in family policy say the baby bonus is backward-looking.
For years we've campaigned long and hard and we've gone to great lengths to get the social security matters separated from tax matters, and again this seems a retrograde step toward.
But the Prime Minister believes it helps parents whose financial position forces both to work.
I have tried to do, and the government has tried to do, both in relation to this and over the last 5.5 years, is not to force people into a particular pattern, but to offer them choice.
Tomorrow, John Howard will campaign in the marginal Brisbane seat of Petrie, while Kim Beazley will spend the day in Sydney campaigning and preparing for Wednesday's official Labor launch. In Brisbane, Rani Sadler, 7 News.
Slobodan Milosevic has appeared for the third time before the United Nations War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. The former Yugoslav president is facing new charges for alleged murder and persecution of people in Croatia and Albanians in Kosovo. He maintains his actions were legal.
To defend my nation from the criminal aggression carried out against it, and to defend my people from terrorism.
Already indicted for war crimes in Kosovo in 1999, Milosevic is expected to face new charges of genocide in the Bosnian and Croatian wars. The Versace fashion empire has launched a court battle in Sydney over a private investigator's memoirs. The family is trying to stop the publication of the book, which links some members to organised crime and even murder.
Former private eye and bodyguard Frank Monti says his book The Spying Game details shocking truths about the Versace family. Mr Monti claims he was an employee and confidant of fashion designer Gianni Versace, who was shot dead in 1997. Today, the Versace's lawyer told the federal court Mr Monti's book contains details that are scandalous and false. They claim it wrongly implies the Versace empire, and in particular Gianni's brother Santo and sister Donatella, were involved with the mafia, laundered millions of dollars for organised crime, and could even be suspects in Gianni's murder. Santo Versace has flown to Sydney to defend the family's name.
By Versace.
The Versace's claim Mr Monti had never worked for Gianni or even met him. They say although his book was published in Australia, it could harm their reputation worldwide.
There's clearly an effort here to capitalise on a great tragedy. Gianni Versace isn't here to defend himself, but we are, and we will.
The family's lawyer, Henrik Nicholas QC, told the court evidence clearly demonstrates Mr Monti feeds on the oxygen of self-generated publicity, an allegation Mr Monti rejects.
Well, do I need more publicity? I've had 1,600 articles about me.
Monique Wright, 7 News.
Australian GPs are being encouraged to join the battle against the bottle, with research showing up to 1 million Australians have a drinking problem, but most are not telling their doctors.
Vet Richard Taylor doesn't mind admitting he's an alcoholic if it helps others to recognise their drinking problems.
People choose a life around them that might be substituting for a potential alcohol dependence. So the workaholic, the sexaholic, the shopaholic.
The latest research indicates 1 million Australians have a drinking problem of varying degrees, but their alcoholism isn't being identified even by their own doctors.
They would say, all my friends drink the same as I do. Well, all your friends are equally at risk of developing liver disease, brain damage, pancreatitis.
A survey of 150 surgeries found 33% of men and 11% of women have dangerous drinking habits. Alcohol-related diseases and accidents kill 6,000 people a year. Work and lifestyle contributes to Australians drinking more than any other English-speaking country. Alcoholism has been here for generations. 7% of the population has an addiction. New guidelines will now help GPs do an alcohol audit to identify those who drink too much.
Enable the general practitioner to feed back information to people about their drinking so that they can make informed decisions about their drinking.
And like Richard, restart their life.
I'm having a good day, and I couldn't say that when I was drinking.
Kirsty Bozeman, 7 News.
Sports news is up next as Brett Lee banks on a comeback to the Test team. And Australia's speed skaters off to Salt Lake.
The Melbourne meat scandal.
Lamb would be very close to 100% up.
Our best exported, but we pay sky-high prices for what's left.
I think I save around $100 a month.
Now you can get top quality cheaper. Tomorrow on Today Tonight.
Would a secure future change the way you look at life? Choose your future and change the way you look at life. Invest with Perpetual.
Are you aware of lupus, the hidden disease?
Lupus?
All those rashes on your face and body.
It's lupus?
You feel sick when you go out in the sun.
I've never heard of lupus.
Your joints hurt. You've been losing hair. You feel tired and weak.
So how do I know if it's lupus?
Just ask your doctor or call the Victorian Lupus Association.
At least